Hanji, and welcome to another episode of the Not in the Clouds podcast. I actually recently bumped into Gyan, and he said, "Why do you always sound so surprised at the beginning of a podcast? Like you forget what the name of your podcast is called." But you guys just.
I was going to say you didn't sound as enthusiastic today as you normally are.
Yeah, because what he said was bugging me, but at least he's listening, and I'm glad he's listening. And if he's listening to this, well done, thank you. You made me. I actually practiced.
The first 10 seconds in. Yeah. After this, he's shutting his Spotify.
But yeah, all good now. All good. We're back on form. Back at work, and everything is all good. How are you guys doing this week?
It's been a good week. There was Shruti from India, Bibi Avtar Kaur, who's a huge personality and a huge raggi. They were in Leicester performing. They've been doing workshops with the kids. And it was really nice. Like loads of kids from even East London came down to Birmingham to be in her workshop and learn from her.
Yeah, so Raj was there, Akash Parekh was there, Upneet played tabla, accompanied. It was a fantastic event. And just a little bit of background on Bibi Avtar Kaur. She learnt from the esteemed Pandit Ajoy Chakrabarti. To even learn from him and to gain an ounce of knowledge from him is a huge thing. And she's passing it on to a lot of the kids in Panisab. I was fortunate enough to be there when there was a Batik happening. Now, there's a Batik that goes on every night in Panisab in the Kala Kender. And the kids that she is actually teaching and raising, they're phenomenal. Something that I was reading this week was the latest Satjug Ank, which hasn't been put up on the Satjug app yet. It contains Maharaj Bir Singh Ji's writings, and some of the stuff is amazing. And I was actually reading what they were writing about Sangeet and how, there is almost a Maryada for Sangeet as well. And they go into depth into how Kirtan is done and in what sense and what state of mind one goes into whilst doing Kirtan. And that's really cool to read. If you ever have an opportunity to pick up the Ank or they update the Satjug app. Guys, what have you guys been consuming?
It's a docu-series. It is in a documentary format, but it's with a reconstruction with it of the story of Moses. And it's really interesting around that is something I haven't really read into a lot, but how Moses was born into the house of a prince in Egypt, into the pharaohs, and then after that obviously his ancestry is not aligned with that, and he sees one of the taskmasters that are, obviously they had loads of taskmasters there that were building the pyramids and building all these massive statues that they would build. And he was doing anyay. He was really harming one of the workers. And deep inside of him, he didn't like that. And he felt a certain way about it. And he picks up a stone and actually murders him. And this is what causes him to run away from the Egyptian kingdom. And he ends up going to this other tribe where he eventually gets married. He eventually has 2 kids. And this is very near the Mount Sinai, where it's then said he climbs up that mountain and he essentially does bhajan with a Kalpuruk, and he receives the commandments at that point. So it's quite interesting. I haven't watched a lot of it, but what I've watched so far, I would definitely recommend it. The other thing, a bit on a different note, was the Channel 4 documentary around how when Indians and Sikh had come to the UK for the first time, defiance fighting the far right. And it was essentially all of people from our community and when they're growing up in Southall and the kind of extremism they experienced.
My chacha was around in that time, and my dad was around that time as well.
Living in the UK, a lot of people when they first came over, first generation, like our parents, one of the biggest, or what was in that documentary, Juan? Was it the struggles that people had in terms of maintaining their identity, or?
Yeah, it was this culture clash essentially, and one of the points that struck with me, and it makes sense actually, is he was saying it wasn't really about the color of your skin, even though that was made an issue. It was more about the culture and what you knew. He was saying the people that had come from Jamaica and the people that were traditionally from this country, they had one thing in common, which was Christianity. Whereas we had come and we were Sikh, and all our traditions were different, our way of living was different, and our eating was different. And yeah, it's like Sagu Pratap Singh Ji says, the first way to destroy a group of people, step by step, if you wanted to do it, first you destroy their food, then you destroy what they wear, and then you destroy what they think in terms of their values. So
there's loads of social norms that we grow up with that, you know, we just imposed on us. Like Asa, you came when you were, how old were you? 10?
5.
Oh, you were 5.
5 or 6, yeah. So I came when year 2000, and I remember, I think I was put into year 3, and basically did all my schooling, primary school, secondary school, college, in the UK, and then that was all like school uniform. I remember school uniform in my secondary school was black, and I remember challenging the headmaster to say, we wear a white turban, and that's an exemption that I'd like to keep, in that I still want to wear my white turban. And he sort of brought me in after he brought my parents in for a conversation to understand why, because everybody else at the time was wearing either a black bag or a black batka, so it was like, why should we give you an exemption, sort of thing. My mum and dad took him through the history of you know, we're namdhari Sikhs, and it, funnily enough, it just so happened that I can't remember which year Holla it was, but it was a UK Holla, and it was celebrated at Holyhead School. So the Namdhari Sangat of the UK had hired out the school that I went to for a Holla Mela, and so that history was there. And then the headmaster connected the dots. He was like, "Oh, you guys are those Sikhs." So I was allowed to wear my pug throughout secondary school.
That was Sakuji just planting the seeds all those years ago, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think. But my Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji's Pairava has been instrumental in that, as a kid, like, all you want to do is fit in with society, with friends, and like make friends and not be singled out for being different. And that's the biggest thing. And I remember, because I went to Punjabi school at Sohrad Gurdwara, I remember an incident where, so after Punjabi class, we'd go to the Darbar Hall to Matha Tekana, and I'm in my Pairava. So my mum made it a point, we're going to the Gurdwara. If you're going to the Gurdwara, you're going to wear your bana, hana? You're not going to wear tracksuit bottoms or whatever. So going in Pairava, and I remember Matha taking and coming back, and a lady who was sitting in the Sangat grabbed my kurta and like was like looking at the material. And I remember, and like she looked at me and she was like, you know, it looks nice, sort of thing. Ishare naal. And for a little kid like that, it was like it was validation. Ki, you know, this is socially acceptable to be wearing this in public. And so it sort of, like you say, it was sowing the seeds early of having confidence in being able to wear something which stands out from the crowd.
I wasn't born into this tradition, so I didn't grow up wearing bana. But when I saw a kurta pajama, when I came into the Namdhari Sangat, it was one of those, just the shape of the kurta pajama, the way it, you know, sits, the way it flares, the way, you know, it gives somebody robe. It was very attractive. Whenever I do put my kurta pajama on and I get ready, I feel $1 million. When I'm walking out the house, I feel like, you know what? This is Sach Paatshah's identity, and they've given us this.
I know we've had like comments saying, because we're always wearing North Face or Nike, that this podcast is sponsored by the North Face. It's not. Yeah, but the reason why it gives you so much power is because if you think about like brands like Ralph Lauren or Marks and Spencer's or Tommy Hilfiger, like, what are the connotations there? One, we don't know who the designer is. We don't know what that brand stands for. And if you look at the recent like political landscape of what's happening with Palestine, people are finding out that these companies, Ralph Lauren, Tommy Hilfiger, M&S, are pro-Israeli, so they're funding the war in some indirect way, right? So people are boycotting these brands because it has a negative connotation with their belief system. But if you look at Sadhguru Gobind Singh Ji's Bana and Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji's Bana, look at the connotation there. It's of protection, unity, service of community, women's rights, and the Indian freedom movement. Like, those are things that we should feel proud to be endorsing as a brand statement.
Everything that we wear was adopted for a certain reason over history. None of the bana that we see now, apart from a dastar and a kashera. The dastar and the kashera are purely unique to the Khalsa tradition and the Sikh tradition. Everything else has been adopted over time. So when I was researching it, in terms of in kind of the Indus region, you can split time into these key kind of phases. So one was ancient India. So this is where you look at the Maurya Empire, the Gupta empires, and this is like 2,000-3,000 BCE. And then all of us know then it becomes this Islamic invasion, Mughal period, starting with Babur, and how that then has an impact on that region. Then after that, one that we all know and probably know the most is this colonial era, which is the British rule. And then everything after that is like post-independence and how things have changed. And when people have studied how fashion has changed over time in that region, they split it into these phases. And when I was looking at it, really from a Puratan, what we call Sanatam Taram, or what people like to call it now, I don't really understand the term, but if you want to look at it like from more of a historical perspective, is that really in our tradition and from a Taram perspective, stitched clothing wasn't really worn. So even if you look at the Hindu tradition now, anytime they're going to do a puja, I don't know if you've ever seen it. I haven't seen it personally, but when I was researching it, that they do not wear any stitched clothing. So anything that has any stitches in there, they will just not use it. And the reason of that is the Brahmin class, they would think that anything that has stitching has the connotations of Kshatri, Dharam. Because at that time, the only people who could afford or had the robe, like you were saying, that robe to actually wear something that was more complicated, was the Kshatris. So this is where you see the tradition of what we call the Angraka. And I think in our tradition, in the Khalsa tradition, we call it a pushak. And you can see on Asabaji's kurta pajama, that on the kurta you see this round thing that goes like this, and then you see two cuffs that go on each shoulder. And all of this is actually linking it back to that Angraka, which was from the Kshatri tradition. And Guru Gobind Singh Ji saying in Debani, Kshatri ka poot ho, Brahman ko nahe, where Sachi Pashi is promoting the Kshatri tradition. This is where the kurta comes from. Then you see from when I was saying the Islamic invasions of India, where people are coming from Persia, from Turkey, and you can say this kind of starts from Babur. You can say it starts a little bit prior to that, but let's for just for the sake of this, we start with Babur. The traditions that they brought is they came from regions that were a little bit more cold, and what that meant was they wore clothes that were more for colder weather. And the other thing is they were more in tradition of what a warrior would wear. So what came with that was a dastar. And this is where we see connotations of where Domalla comes from. So if you see the old pictures of like Dara Shikoh and Bahadur Shah, even Aurangzeb, when you see their pictures, what you'll see is that the dastar is made of two connecting pieces. So you see one piece that goes across the head like this, and you'll see another completely different color that's going over. You see some Sikhs now, they actually try and replicate this. And you see some of the old frescoes of Guru Gobind Singh Ji, Sache Pasha Ji, actually adorning this type of dastar. But when you look at all of those different frescoes, one thing is the kind of what we can say the foot soldiers or the pyare of Sadhguruji. One, you would never see them wearing a pajama. So even if you see Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji's tasveer, the people that were belonging to the Raj aspect of the Panth, so the Subhas or Sadhguruji themselves, they would wear pajama, churidar pajama, because this is coming from the Rajputs, the Marathis, and what we saw from the Islamic invasion as well. All of these kings would wear churidar pajama. This is why, actually, a fun fact, did we know that why we take our pajama off when we're doing a Nand Karaj or when we're sitting in a Akhand Path? I don't know if you've ever thought of that, why we have to take it off. The actual tradition of that is because this Juridar pajama, Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji says, even though we have adopted it from a kingly perspective, we do not adopt it from a Khalsa perspective. This is why anything that is involved from a Dharmic Karaj, we take it off, as we do not accept it as part of our Bana at that time, as part of the Khalsa Bana. So that's a fun fact there. And yeah, like I was saying, if the Juridar pajama was mainly optimized for horse riding. It was mainly optimized for kingly activities. But like I said, if you look at all of those old frescoes, you would see a similar type of dastar that we've all tied now, and which Bhai Khan Singh Ji refers to as the Gurmukhi dastara. And you would never see any of the soldiers of Sadhguruji. You would never see them ever wear a pajama. So even when you see paintings of Bhai Hira Singh Ji, Bhai Lerna Singh, but when you see pictures of Suba Sahib Singh, they always have a pajama on. So there's this difference between those who are kings and then the ones that are purely a part of the Khalsa tradition, these people that are Nahangs essentially, those that are pure warriors.
You must have seen a picture of Sadhguru Pratap Singh Ji, the very early on. Their kurta pajama was slightly different, where it had like a
string, yeah. So that
string.
Yeah, so that where it comes essentially when you open that up, me and Asapaji have seen it actually when we went to the Bagali Goti.
Yeah.
Essentially that fully opens up. One bit over here hangs onto this part here, and then the chest part of the design would tie over here. That is what we like in our tradition call a pushak, but essentially that is an angrakha.
Yeah.
The older angrakhas, they would have a lot more pleats. But you have to imagine from a warrior perspective, when you look at the paintings of Dara Shikoh and the other ones that I had mentioned, you see their pushaks are quite long, so nearly going up to their ankles really. Whereas in the Khalsa tradition, we would never keep our clothes that long because it's just not practical for war. Like if you had something that long, hanging off of your body, it's very difficult to run. Even a very large dastar, no offense to anybody when it comes to this, but even a very large dastar practically is not practical for warfare. So when we see in Maharaja Ranjit Singh Ji's period, I think Asapaji sent a reference of the people that were actually documenting what they would see, and they said mostly they would tie around a 5-meter dastar, and they saw that as the Sikh helmet essentially.
You see how things have changed, even like we've visually seen it through photographs from, and actually having Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji's and Sadhguru Pratap Singh and Sadhguru Hari Singh Ji's bastard in Pani Sahib. From there you've seen the change to what we wear now, and everything is always evolving. It doesn't mean that because they wore that in that time, we still wear it today. Everything evolves, and the bana that Asapaji is wearing now, that Jawan Singh Ji you're wearing now, that is practical for today's. And even in a you can walk out in a business meeting, or as Sacha Pashaji does all the time, in that kurta pajama, and still feel professional. You know what I mean?
I think a lot of people like this. There's a very common thing that is said that the star is this crown that Guru Gobind Singh Ji blessed us with. But I think it's easy to say that, but you have to remember that during that period of Islamic rule, you can take Babur, or even after that Jahangir, Bahadur Shah, Aurangzeb, all of these different kings. There was actually rules in place that people that are caught with this type of dastar, they are to be killed on sight. Like even another element that I was looking into was around the introduction of actual Sikh bibi and Sikh females tying the dastar. When we look at the history of that, if you look like maybe 60 years prior, that wouldn't have been seen anywhere. If you look at any of the old paintings of Sikh women, you would not see any women tying a dastar. This was also introduced later on. When we see older pictures, there's one picture of Nihang Singh and his wife. And when you see the picture of the Nihang Singh and the picture of the wife, is very, if you looked at the picture of the female, you'd think it was a namdhari woman, where you see the style of that salwar.
And also in that picture is where her juda is as well. Her juda isn't traditionally at the back.
Hanji.
It was almost like where
near
ours
the top, at the top, So I think that's also transcended across of whether the juda should be at the top or at the back, and those kind of elements. But one thing that I think needs a bit more research is where this introduction of the dastar happened. Like that for me is quite unique, that I haven't seen in history where we have any proof that was being done prior to maybe
that's
the
on
last
women
50.
you're saying?
Yeah, for women starting to tie the stars, I don't know where that phenomenon started from.
If anyone's got any insight on that, please add your comments or DM them into the Instagram account.
The rebrand that Islam has had throughout the centuries, in that, like now, when we think about Pakistan or an Islamic state, we associate the colour green, right? But back then, Sadhguru Nanak Dev Ji Sahib, they quite clearly point out that Neel Bastar Pair Hove Parvan, Balesh Tan Le Puje Paran, that these Pandits and people started wearing the colour blue to try and appease these Mughal oppressors who were invading India.
During the Mughal period, they did actually promote green quite a lot, which I found out. But also in terms of what was considered their army mainly wore blue.
So I found out that traditionally the namdhari kurta pajama, including the dastar, would have been hand spun at home with locally sourced cotton. And the reason why I found that interesting was because post Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji and after the boycott of British goods and services, we would have had to maintain those skills in-house, because complete boycott of British clothing was part of the overarching boycott of postal services, rail services, education. And if you think about it from a political standpoint, what's the best way of impacting a business, which the East India Company, which then became the British Raj, was essentially a business trying to fund shareholders in the UK. And how do you impact a business? Like, let's look at Palestine and Israel. You boycott their services, so you impact their shareholders. And so, boycott was used as a political weapon against the East India Company and the Raj. And there's a really good, actually, podcast that I'd recommend anybody that has the time. It's called Empire on Spotify, and it's by Anita Anand and William Dalrymple. It's brilliant because they go into the depths of what the East India Company was and how it dissolved and then became the British Raj, essentially.
Yes, Sadhguru Ram Singh Ji said to have homespun cotton, but it was actually taxed. So if you were to buy Indian goods at that time, you were taxed heavier than if you were to buy something that was either imported or created by the British. So that whole boycott was because the whole system was being exploited.
It was rigged.
Yeah, it's like now I've just been to Doha and everything was exported there. So I would go to a restaurant and ask for water, and they'd come with a bottle of Evian, and I'm like, Evian is from the UK, and I was like, I don't want exported water. And he goes, well, we've got local water, and it's like at a quarter of the price. And I go, yeah, give me the local water. I don't want. I get enough of Evian now.
This is where you got the shits.
Should have gone for the Evian.
No, I'm joking, but valid point.
Asapaji, you always mention this one Sakhi to me around Pehrava from the reference from Sagu Pratap Singh Ji and the Ramayana, if you could share that.
Yes,
because you've mentioned that to me a couple of times.
What we've discussed so far is all the history and the context for where we are today. But the spiritual side is also really interesting. And I remember it was only very recently that I heard this Updesh, and it was Sakhi was essentially of Ravan, and he's captured Sita Mata, and he has nefarious intentions, right? And he has the capability of shape-shifting. So he talks to his Vajir, who is his counselor, and says basically, I've tried everything to try and enchant Sita Mata into falling in love with me, because he can't force her. So he's trying other means. And his Vajir says, his counselor says, but why don't you pretend to be Ramchandraji, Sri Ramchandraji, and adorn that kind of attire and trick her into accepting you. And Ravan quite amusingly says, when I adorn Sri Ramchandraji's Pairava, then those intentions, those ill intentions in my mind, and those thoughts no longer come into my mind. So he's like, the thing that my intention is then washed away, and I start to think pure thoughts. And I thought, let's put this to the test. So working from home, you're a bit more relaxed, Hannah. So in shorts and like a t-shirt at work. But then I thought, let's try, after listening to this Updesh, I thought, let's try wearing kurta pajama, Hannah, like at home whilst working. And bad habits, as you're working, you're half in the meeting, half scrolling on social media. We're all guilty of it. I hope my manager's not watching, but I can, from personal experience, from going from when I wasn't wearing kurta pajama to when then I was wearing kurta pajama, the suggestions that you get on social media, they're like worlds apart.
What?
So whilst wearing kurta pajama, I'd be like, and I don't know how Instagram's doing this, whether I've got like a security camera that's been hacked or something. But I'd be getting recommendations of Sant Indrajit Singh Ji Rakbe Wale, Penny Saab, and all these Sant Gyani Maskeen Singh Ji, Maskeen Ji, and all of these recommendations. Whereas before it'd be like these social media influencers trying to sell me makeup. Yeah, so, but that, and then also, what are we trying to get back to? It's like the golden age of Satyug, right? And what does Satyug personify? It's honesty, righteousness, spiritual and inner awareness, that whole self-realization piece of Advait, and justice and harmony, right? And Sadhguru Nanak Dev Ji have and this is going to be a fun fact, but actually, no, I'm not going to tell you my fun facts, but there was a Japanese study conducted in 2023, and they determined that the color which absorbs the least amount of heat was white, because, as we know, black absorbs heat, white reflects heat, and every single yug has a color associated to it. And Satyug is white, and Kalyug is black. Dwapar is yellow, and Treta is red. And so if we're trying to, get to this golden age of Satyug where honesty, righteousness, etc., then from a spiritual point of view, and Sadhguru Nanak Dev Ji writes, Bhagarata Piyala Kala Beda Kari Pukar. So they referenced these different colors for each yug.
Just touching upon that, I mean, the first time I went to a Holla Mahalla Mela, I remember just looking out in the pandal, and it was the pandal before this one. And just looking across and seeing a sea of white. You got white turbans, white kurta pajama. It's a beautiful thing to see. All you see is white. You literally don't think about anything else. Nothing else enters your mind at that point. And I was just saying this to Nina today as well, and we were discussing this on our walk. And we were saying, over there, nothing matters. When you're in that divan, like here, you go to Nam Simran on a Saturday night or you go Sunday morning, you're still thinking about, okay, after this, I'm going to go and get ice cream, or tomorrow morning, we're going to wake up and we're going to do this, and we've got so much to do. I know we were on holiday, so it is, the grass is always greener. However, just there, you don't think about anyone or anything else.
Another part of that Upadesh, because I think we've spoken a lot about the outward appearance, and actually Sadhguru Ji, when they're talking about Pahrava, even though it has a spiritual element, Sadhguru Ji, when introducing this topic, says that e viharik arja hai, meaning,
Yeah.
and if I was talking about Viharik, is more from a societal perspective. And they talk about, at that time, the Namdhari Diwans did not look at the way they do now. This is over a long period of time. Whereas before, the men would wear bana, but the females, they would wear like traditional clothing, but it would be in a lot of different colors. And Sadhguruji at some point would ask the Pehredars to say anybody that is not wearing appropriate colors for them to not come and sit in the divan. And the reason that they were giving is because people get distracted. Why are you causing attention upon yourself in the darbar? You could come with humility. So I found that quite interesting how Satyapashi introduced it in that sense. Because really all of these different topics, without Bani, without Nityanem, what is Sadhguru Govind Singh Ji mentions that that they are not fond of those that are pektari. And pektari means that those that just have all of the outward appearance, but nothing on the inside. If it remains this outward thing that, oh, I'm following this tradition, I'm so great, like I'm maintaining all these Puratan disciplines, beautiful. I think the Khalsa as a Panth is there to do that. But I don't think it's there to only do that.
Akal Purakh is for everyone. There's no matter what style of dastar you wear or what color you wear, whether it's black or white or blue, like he's everybody's equally. The identity that we have, it's like a sports team, and like if you support Man U, you're gonna wear that jersey to the day you die. And there are people that are very passionate like that, but then there's passion behind it as well. Like if they've got that Man United top, then there's real emotion and real drive behind it as well. So otherwise it's if it's just a facade, which again, a lot of Gurbani is poking back at me saying don't be a hypocrite, because the result of hypocrisy is ego, and the result of ego is separation, and the result of separation is suffering.
For all of us in Gurbani it says chitte janke kapde Male chit kathor. So this is a reminder to us that it shouldn't just remain like an outward act or like a karmakand. Each individual thing has to have a deeper meaning for it to actually have an overall purpose. Because when we're going to die, all of this is going to become ashes.
More than a deeper meaning, your Gadni and your Gani need to be one. So what you're saying and what you're doing need to be equal.
Gani te Karni, let's not... Yeah, hypocrisy is the one thing that Sadhguru Nanak Dev Ji doesn't like.
I think on that note, I think we've touched a lot upon different types of Bhairava, our history of Bhairava, what we feel whilst wearing it, and we'd like to hear from you guys what you think. And yeah, I'm gonna move on to the next segment, which is what is your fun facts?
I was seeing a fun fact was that there was a what do you call those Christians that travel around? That go and missionaries, that's it. And one of them was talking about how a missionary comes to the Sikh Empire, and Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji makes sure that he is looked after, and Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji decides to have a what do you call it, like a kind of a civil debate with him. 1 second, let me show you a picture really quickly.
Oh wow, he looks estranged.
Yeah, I thought it was Winston Churchill for a second when I first started reading the thread. But yeah, we'll put the Twitter thread in the chat. But yeah, he also talks with Hari Singh Nalwa, and it mentions that Hari Singh Nalwa was really interested in talking to him because he was fascinated by Christianity, which I thought was which is my fun fact. But I would definitely recommend reading the whole thread. It shows Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji and the Sikh Empire's approach to religious discourse. And there was no anonymity. But the one thing, and which I found really interesting, is that as soon as a wolf comes to the Sikh Empire, he starts proselytizing, or whatever they call it. He starts saying that Jesus is the only one that can save you. And here it goes again, where the Christians get annoyed with me. But I promise I'm not trying to annoy you. Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji says to him that, sorry, mate, that's not happening. But come, let's go and have a discussion. But you can't do that here. And I liked that approach, that even though he stopped that and said, look, you can't go around and do that. But he, at the highest level of the Sikh Empire, got to have those discussions with people like Hari Singh Nalwa, people like Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji. And it mentions Maharaj Ranjit Singh Ji's close aides as well, and their viziers that are there to give answers to a lot of their questions.
Do you guys wear ties?
I used to for secondary school.
So wearing a tie can reduce blood flow to the brain by 7.5%.
That's why I failed my GCSE.
There you go.
That's what it was.
Oh, yes, I have another thing that I can blame it on.
And my A-levels.
That's very good fact for the theme of this whole podcast. I like that. Thank you for that thoughtful fact.
Very thoughtful, Hanji.
Mine's not thoughtful, but it is practical.
Is it Japanese?
It's not Japanese. Did you know? Well, actually, I'm going to try to get you to do it. Try and hold your nose and try and hum.
My nose is blocked, man.
Try.
Oh, you can't do it.
It's practically impossible to hum when you've got your nose pinched.
Yeah, it's like the... yeah, like it stops it. Interesting.
See?
Is that a fun fact?
Interesting. Is it?
And that's not even practical. When am I meant to use that?
When you're in your coffin.
Somebody might challenge you to an impromptu hum off on the streets.
Ask them to hold their nose.
Yeah, pinch their nose.
No, Baji, you need to give another fact, man. I'm not happy with that one.
No, we're gonna have to wait an hour for him to just find that. We've done this whole episode and he couldn't find one fact.
No, he'll find another one. He'll find another one.
Dogs can smell cancer. Did you know that?
It's just a contrast. You're blocking your nose to a dog smelling cancer.
Did you know dogs can smell cancer? It's mad.
I did know that. Yeah, I did know. I've heard of this. Yeah.
TikTok. I don't even know it's true. If it's true, I just believe it.
It's true. It's true. No, it's true. I've heard that. But the fact that I heard it doesn't make it true. But yeah. How do you even sign it off now?
Till the next episode, guys. Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal.